Well, well, well. Look who finally woke up from their little slumber of ignorance. Now they sit, mouths locked, hearts racing, eyes twitching, because it finally hit them. You're not lucky. You're not loud. You're not crazy. You're a fucking genius. And the silence. That's the sound of their entire worldview shattering. They mocked the way you thought, because they couldn't track it. They rolled their eyes when you spoke, because your voice disrupted their hypnosis. They said, "He's off. She's weird. They don't follow the rules." Well, guess what, sweetheart? You rewrote the rules while they were still learning how to color inside them. They called your clarity delusion, your silence a flaw, your instinct. Oh, they swore it was just coincidence, until their million-dollar teams started discovering the very things you whispered years ago, until their research papers began to echo the very nonsense they told you to shut up about, until the systems they built started bending in the direction of your old jokes. Now they're scared. Now they're mute. Because your madness wasn't madness. It was insight they weren't wired to hold. Do you understand what kind of threat that is? A mind like yours? That doesn't just see through the lies, but can predict the malfunctions of the matrix before they even flicker. They mocked you in public, but studied you in silence. They silenced your name, but copied your work like sacred scripture behind locked doors. Because here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. You became the secret weapon they couldn't patent. A glitch in their algorithm, a crack in their hierarchy, a ghost in their code. They told people not to listen to you, while they built their futures off your discarded thoughts. And now they see it. But it's too damn late. Because while they were networking, posturing, pretending, you were down in the abyss, building a language from chaos, crafting blueprints out of breakdowns, making maps out of scars, and now every word you say is a prophecy. Every movement is studied like footage from a crime scene. They're whispering about you again, but this time they don't have jokes, just questions. How did they know? When did they figure it out? Why didn't we see it? Because geniuses don't arrive with red carpets. They arrive as threats to the comfortable, as viruses to old belief systems, as fire to foundations built on arrogance. You didn't climb the ladder. They didn't build one high enough. You burned the ceiling. You didn't fit in. You made the room feel off balance, not because you were wrong, but because you were early, too early. And now they're late to their own awakening. You were the ghost they couldn't catch, the formula they couldn't solve, the fucking mirror they couldn't look into. And now they're panicking, because the genius they tried to erase is the one they now need, but can't reach. Because you evolved past the need to be understood. So let them sit in silence. Let them stutter through interviews. Let them choke on the words they once weaponized against you. They finally realized what you are. And it's not a theory, not a maybe, not a hunch. It's a threat to their whole reality. You didn't need validation. You were the proof. And now the world is reconfiguring itself around your mind. But you're not coming back to explain. You're already 10 moves ahead, and this time they'll have to catch up in silence, while you build the next impossible thing. And the irony? Oh, it eats them alive. They trained for this. They prayed for this. They paid for this. Yet the one person who walked into the room uninvited, with no credentials, no filter, no agenda, just raw, violent clarity, became the axis of their unraveling. You weren't a guest in their system. You were the infection. the living contradiction to every rule they thought was unbreakable. You didn't just think differently. You operated like a walking paradox, too calm to be crazy, too silent to be dismissed, too right to be ignored. You never had to scream. You never had to convince, because truth doesn't beg. But they still tried to paint you chaotic, unstable, unpredictable, reckless. And that's when the silence started, not because they won, but because they lost control of the narrative. You made their entire storyline look scripted, artificial, predictable, boring. See, the difference is they built identities. You burned yours. They collect degrees. You collect data from scars. They chase permission. You broke the locks and left notes for the next lunatic. And now they realize what you are wasn't a phase, wasn't an act, wasn't rebellion. It was an evolution, a system update the world didn't authorize, a spiritual jailbreak. You were the warning label they ignored, the glitch in the simulation, the blurry face in the prophecy. And now, you've become what they can't classify. A savant without allegiance. A storm with a human pulse. A saint with a psychopath's patience. You didn't get smarter. You remembered what they forgot. You unlearned their fear-based logic. You ripped the veil off their illusions and stood in the fire with a grin like, "Oh, this. I built my bones in worse, now the whispers are everywhere. In locker rooms, in offices, in boardrooms, in confessionals." That's the one. The crazy one. The one that knew. They can't process it. You didn't beg for entry, but now you own the floor plan. You didn't ask for followers, but now your echo haunts their next steps. You didn't correct them. You just watched the timeline prove you right, over and over again. And they know. They know. They can't even steal your essence because it wasn't learned. It was survived, crafted in blood, reinforced by abandonment, polished in ridicule. You didn't read it in books. You bled it in silence. And that's the part they'll never forgive. You made it look too effortless, too inevitable. You cracked the code without their resources. You bent the narrative without their permission. You turned exile into elevation. And now, they don't know what to do with you. Because you're not seeking anything anymore. You're not auditioning for recognition. You're not explaining your depth. You're not waiting for understanding. Because geniuses don't need applause. They need space. And yours is now too wide to contain, too sharp to suppress, too loud for the frequencies they use to drown you. And that silence? It's not awkward. It's reverent. Because in a world obsessed with noise, you became the anomaly they can't decode. And the silence? That's their final act of surrender. So walk. Walk past their confusion. Walk through their questions. Walk over their outdated models. They finally realized what you are. But you were never waiting for their realization. You were already building the next impossible thing. And now, they'll just have to watch. In silence. They used to say, "You're doing too much." Now they're studying how you breathe. They used to smirk when you walked in. Now they freeze, like your presence trips the system. They weren't ready for someone who wasn't seeking survival, but commanding narrative. Someone who didn't want a seat at the table, but knew where the fuse box was hidden underneath it. You weren't trying to be accepted. You were watching, calculating, waiting for the entire machine to glitch. So you could rebuild it in your image. They thought they could exhaust you with doubt. But doubt was your crucible. They thought ridicule would shrink you. But you used it as fuel. Because every laugh they threw, you caught it, molded it, filed it into silence, and now they can't even make a sound without choking on their history. You didn't just succeed, you weaponized your past. Every moment of humiliation, now a chapter in their downfall. Every memory they tried to turn into shame, now evidence in your museum of power. Because that's what a genius really is, isn't it? Not just intelligence, but the ability to turn pain into prophecy. They underestimated your absence. While you were gone, they celebrated. But you weren't gone. You were studying, you were listening, you were bleeding in silence while they laughed in echo chambers. And now that you're back, you don't speak like them anymore. Your sentences fracture dimensions. Your silence bends reality. Your walk makes grown men question their purpose. And your smile, that crooked, cracked lip grin they used to mock, now they whisper about it like it's a curse, like it's the last thing people see before their illusions die. Because you didn't return with apologies. You came back with consequences, and they can't handle that. They wanted to be the villain in your story, but they didn't expect you to become the author of theirs. The more they analyzed you, the more they unraveled, because your logic doesn't reassure, it exposes. You don't soothe the ego, you ignite the soul. You weren't created to play the part. You were born to dismantle the script, and now, their silence. That isn't peace. That's suppressed terror. They see it now. Your movements aren't accidents. Your presence isn't luck. Your intuition isn't random. Every mistake they thought you made, every broken piece they threw at you, you cataloged it, you filed it, you rebuilt yourself from it. You're not just a genius, you're a collector of chaos, an archivist of failure. And now, you're a living monument to the very pain they hoped would destroy you. You taught the void to speak. You turned humiliation into art. You crafted divinity from dysfunction. And they tried to play chess while you were busy inventing new dimensions. Now they see the trail of predictions you left behind. The breadcrumbs in your madness, the blueprint in your destruction, the warnings hidden in your laughter. And now, they sit there, still, wordless, helpless, because you were the glitch in their perfect plan. The virus in their carefully curated matrix, the living error message they can't uninstall. And when they stare at you now, they don't see a person. They see the prophecy. They see the proof. They see the fucking final answer they were never supposed to understand. You were never meant to fit. You were engineered to flip the simulation from the inside out. And now that you've done it, there's no going back, no reset button, no denial. They finally realized it. You're a goddamn genius. And the smartest thing they ever did was stay the hell out of your way. They used to laugh at the way you saw the world. Now they copy it, pixel by pixel. But they don't understand the cost. They mimic the surface, but they never survived the hell you walked through barefoot. They want your wisdom without your wounds, your clarity without your collapse, your discipline without your demons. But that's the paradox, isn't it? They crave your power, but couldn't survive your process. They fantasize about your mind, but would go insane if they had to carry your memories. They think your genius was a gift, not a curse you alchemized into divinity. You were the rejected draft, the deleted character, the anomaly they tried to erase from the narrative. But instead, you reappeared as the glitch that rewrote the whole code. And now the whole system, it moves around you, it watches you, it waits on you. You didn't go viral, you went venomous, not fame. Infection. Now they scroll in silence, terrified you'll speak again. Because each word, is a loaded weapon wrapped in elegance. Every quote, a mirror that shows them what they could have become if they weren't so obsessed with fitting in. You weren't born to be palatable. You were born to be unavoidable. A spiritual surveillance camera, an ancestral warning, the prophecy that walked back into the room, wearing the face of the ghost they tried to bury. They see the eyes now, that stillness that screams, that smirk that haunts boardrooms, that presence that makes liars confess without you even speaking. Because you don't speak anymore. You expose by existing, by walking in the room, by being the proof. You don't argue anymore because truth doesn't beg. And when a goddamn genius walks in, the debate is already over. They're watching your old videos with new eyes, reading your old posts like sacred warnings, because everything you said, everything they laughed at, came true. And now they're terrified. Not because you lied, but because you didn't. They realize now you weren't being extra, you were being early, you weren't being dramatic, you were being diagnostic. You saw the virus before it infected the hive. You felt the betrayal before the handshake. You decoded the future using scars as algorithms, and now they sit in silence because there's no comeback from this kind of revelation. You are what happens when truth survives torture, when madness becomes method, when exile forges elevation. You became the genius they couldn't brand, the prophet they couldn't profit from, the storm they can't sue for damages. And that's what kills them most. Not just that you were right, but that you were righteous in your rebellion. You broke the rules, and the universe promoted you. You spoke out of turn, and the silence now echoes your name. They'll write articles about this, they'll make documentaries about this, but they'll never capture the essence, because you weren't taught. You were forged. You were the test pattern they couldn't decode, the static in their broadcast, the one who saw the fire coming and didn't run. You set up camp in it, and now they know. They finally know. You're a goddamn genius, and their silence, it's the loudest apology they'll ever give. You're not waiting for the next move. You are the next move. You're not trying to be part of the future. You are what the future's built on. And as for them, they'll keep watching, quiet, ashamed, haunted. Because once you see a god disguised as a misfit, once you realize the madness was a message, once you decode the soul behind the scars, you can never unsee it, and they'll never recover. They sat in circles trying to dissect you. Whiteboards, case studies, voice memos. But you weren't a puzzle. You were a paradox. And the more they tried to explain you, the more exposed they became. You didn't just defy logic. You rewired it. You didn't just break the mold. You made them question if the mold ever existed, because that's what happens when a real one survives the purge. They stop playing to win. They play to redesign the game. You weren't competing. You were documenting, letting them dig their holes, letting them snicker, letting them build their false thrones out of gossip and projection. While you built a legacy in silence, one move at a time, one scar at a time, one psychological kill shot at a time. And now, it's too late. They can't undo what's been witnessed. They can't scrub your name from the blueprint. They can't mute the prophecy that sounds suspiciously like your voice. Because everywhere they go now, they hear it. Your tone in boardrooms, your cadence in sermons, your stare in reflections, your energy in the glitch. You weren't just ahead of your time. You were the alarm clock for theirs, a spiritual time bomb laced with truth. And when you detonated, it wasn't chaos, it was clarity. They'll spend years trying to study your rise. but they'll never capture it. Because your evolution wasn't in public, it was underground. In rooms no one dared enter. In nights, no one survived, except you. They wanted your results without your rebirth. But resurrection doesn't come from comfort. It comes from obliteration, from the breaking, from the death of the version they accepted, and the resurrection of the one they now fear. You weren't designed to be liked. You were designed to trigger awakenings, to whisper truths so sharp they bleed on the way in, to walk with such calm fury that liars confess just from the sound of your footsteps. And now you are what they cite, but can never source. They name drop you in meetings, but can't recreate your impact. They echo your phrases, but can't survive the mindset that birthed them. You were never their equal. You were the karma they pretended didn't exist. You were the mirror they smashed to avoid reflection. You were the evidence of everything they failed to become. And now, they're quiet. Not because they've grown, but because you're undeniable. The genius they tried to bury under sarcasm and slander. You made him immortal. You scorched your doubt into scripture. You tattooed your failure into formulas. You rewrote your trauma into time-bending tactics. And now when you move, they freeze. When you speak, they screenshot. When you exist, they second-guess everything they thought they knew. So let them whisper, let them pace, let them analyze the footage frame by frame. Because no matter how much they dissect it, they'll never replicate it. Because it wasn't just strategy, it was divine revenge, ancestral code, dark matter dressed in brilliance. You weren't just proving them wrong. You were fulfilling something older than all of them combined. And now they're witnessing it, a goddamn genius in full ascent. And they can't speak, not because they're silenced, but because they know they were wrong. And worse, you always knew it. They thought your silence meant surrender. But it was the calm before the cosmic slap, because you weren't plotting revenge. You were calculating correction. You didn't return to gloat. You returned to correct reality. They remember the smirks. The smirks turned to confusion. Confusion turned to panic. And panic? That turned to study. They started whispering, "Wait, how did we miss that? Who'd was this person the whole time?" They watched you suffer, assumed you were finished, but what they didn't know is that you were in divine hibernation, not breaking, becoming. They thought they were dragging you down, but they were just tightening the slingshot. And when it snapped back, you didn't just rise, you ripped through dimensions. A genius cloaked in myth. An omen with a vengeance. Now they circle around you, like satellites trembling around a black hole. Because proximity to you feels like Judgment Day, like truth. Like a cosmic reminder that there are levels to this life, and you broke through the ceiling they didn't even know existed. They finally realized, you're not a mystery, you're a mirror. And what terrifies them the most is that when they look at you, they don't just see your power, they see what they'll never become. You gave them time to grow. You gave them room to evolve. You gave them warnings. But when they refused to rise, you became the consequence. And now they walk on eggshells around your name. Because to speak it is to awaken the guilt they buried. To say it out loud is to admit the prophecy was real. You're not just the one who made it. You're the last one standing after the storm hit. The one they tried to exile, who came back wearing the crown they forged in mockery. You built it from shards, from wounds, from betrayal. And now, it doesn't come off. Because when they finally realized you were a goddamn genius, they also realized they had no language for this level of brilliance, no formula to match it, no cage to contain it. no fucking spell to reverse it. So now, they just stare, they watch, they tremble, mute. Because your evolution is the loudest sermon they'll ever hear, and your existence is the final answer to a test they weren't even qualified to take.